Chapter 32. The Finger is Not the Moon. One afternoon, Sariputta and Moggallana brought a friend, the ascetic Dighanakha, to meet the Buddha. Dighanakha was as well known as Sanjaya. He also happened to be Sariputta's uncle. When he learned that his nephew had become a disciple of the Buddha, he was curious to learn about the Buddha's teaching. When he asked Sariputta and Moggallana to explain the teaching to him, they suggested he meet directly with the Buddha. Dighanakha asked the Buddha, "Gautama, what is your teaching? What are your doctrines? For my part, I dislike all doctrines and theories. I don't subscribe to any at all." The Buddha smiled and asked, "Do you subscribe to your doctrine of not following any doctrines? Do you believe in your doctrine of not believing?" Somewhat taken aback, Dighanakha replied, "Gautama, whether I believe or don't believe is of no importance." The Buddha spoke gently. Once a person is caught by belief in a doctrine, he loses all his freedom. When one becomes dogmatic, he believes his doctrine is the only truth and that all other doctrines are heresy. Disputes and conflicts all arise from narrow views. They can extend endlessly, wasting precious time and sometimes even leading to war. Attachment to views is the greatest impediment to the spiritual path. Bound to narrow views, one becomes so entangled that it is no longer possible to let the door of truth open. Let me tell you a story about a young widower who lived with his 5-year-old son. He cherished his son more than his own life. One day he left his son at home while he went out on business. When he was gone, brigands came and robbed and burned the entire village. They kidnapped his son. When the man returned home, he found the charred corpse of a young child lying beside his burned house. He took it to be the body of his own son. He wailed in grief and cremated what was left of the corpse. Because he loved his son so dearly, he put the ashes in a bag which he carried with him everywhere he went. Several months later, his son managed to escape from the brigands and make his way home. He arrived in the middle of the night and knocked at the door. At that moment, the father was hugging the bag of ashes and weeping. He refused to open the door, even when the child called out that he was the man's son. He believed that his own son was dead, and that the child knocking at the door was some neighborhood child mocking his grief. Finally, his son had no choice but to wander off on his own. Thus the father and son lost each other forever. You see, my friend, if we are attached to some belief and hold it to be the absolute truth, we may one day find ourselves in a similar situation as the young widower. Thinking that we already possess the truth, we will be unable to open our minds to receive the truth, even if truth comes knocking at our door. Dighanakha asked, "But what of your own teaching? If someone follows your teaching, will he become caught in narrow views?" "My teaching is not a doctrine or a philosophy. It is not the result of discursive thought or mental conjecture by various philosophies, which contend that the fundamental essence of the universe is fire, water, earth, wind, or spirit, or that the universe is either finite or infinite, temporal or eternal. Mental conjecture and discursive thought about truth are like ants crawling around the rim of a bowl. They never get anywhere. My teaching is not a philosophy. It is the result of direct experience. The things I say come from my own experience. You can confirm them all by your own experience. I teach that all things are impermanent and without a separate self. This I have learned from my own direct experience, and you can too. I teach that all things depend on all other things to arise, develop, and pass away. Nothing is created from a single original source. I have directly experienced this truth, and you can also. My goal is not to explain the universe, but to help guide others to have a direct experience of reality. Words cannot describe reality. Only direct experience enables us to see the true face of reality. Dighanakha exclaimed, "Wonderful, wonderful, Gautama! But what would happen if a person did perceive your teaching as a dogma?" The Buddha was quiet for a moment, and then nodded his head. "Dighanakha, that is a very good question. My teaching is not a dogma or a doctrine, but no doubt some people will take it as such. I must state clearly that my teaching is a method to experience reality and not reality itself. Just as a finger pointing at the moon is not the moon itself. An intelligent person makes use of the moon to see the moon, use of the finger to see the moon. A person who only looks at the finger and mistakes it for the moon will never see the real moon. My teaching is a means of practice, not something to hold on to or worship. My teaching is like a raft used to cross the river. Only a fool would carry the raft around after he had already reached the other shore, the shore of liberation." Dighanakha joined his palms. "Please, Lord Buddha, show me how to be liberated from painful feelings." The Buddha said, "There are three kinds of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. All three have roots in perceptions of mind and body. Feelings arise and pass away, like any other mental or material phenomena. I teach the method of looking deeply in order to illuminate the nature and source of feelings, whether they are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. When you can see the source of your feelings, you will understand their nature. You will see that feelings are impermanent, and gradually you will remain undisturbed by their arising and passing away. Almost all painful feelings have their source in an incorrect way of looking at reality. When you uproot erroneous views, suffering ceases. Erroneous views cause people to consider the impermanent to be permanent. Ignorance is the source of all sufferings. We practice the way of awareness in order to overcome ignorance. One must look deeply into things in order to penetrate their true nature. One cannot overcome ignorance through prayers and offerings." Sariputta, Moggallana, Kaladaya, Nagasamala, and Channa all listened as the Buddha explained these things to Dighanakha. Sariputta was able to grasp the meaning of the Buddha's words the most deeply. He felt his own mind shine like a bright sun. Unable to conceal his joy, he joined his palms and prostrated himself before the Buddha. Moggallana prostrated himself as well. Then Dighanakha, moved and profoundly impressed by all the Buddha had said, also prostrated himself before the Buddha. Kaladai and Channa were deeply moved by this scene. They felt proud to be associated with the Buddha, and their faith and trust in his way was further strengthened. A few days later after that, Queen Vaidehi and an attendant visited and made food offerings to the Sangha. She also brought a young plumeria sapling and planted it beside the Buddha's hut in remembrance of the story he had told the children in the palace courtyard. Under the Buddha's guidance, the community made ever greater progress along the path. Sariputta and Moggallana were like shining stars with their keen intelligence, diligence, and leadership abilities. They worked with Kundana and Kassapa to organize and guide the Sangha. However, even as the Sangha reputation was growing, some people began to speak ill of the Buddha and his community. Some of these rumors were spread by members of religious factions who were jealous of the king's support for the Sangha. Lay disciples who often visited Bamboo Forest expressed concern over what was being said. Apparently, some people in Rajagaha were distressed that so many young men from wealthy and noble families had become bhikkhus. They feared that soon all the young men would abandon their homes, and there would be no more suitable husbands for the noble young women in Rajagaha. Entire family lines could be discontinued, they warned. Many bhikkhus were not pleased when they heard these things, but when the Buddha was informed, he calmed both the laity and the bhikkhus by saying, "Don't worry about such things. Sooner or later, all such talk will die down." And it did. In less than a month, there was no more talking about such trifling fears. Chapter 33. Beauty that does not fade. 2 weeks before the rainy retreat ended, a woman of uncommon beauty paid a visit to the Buddha. She arrived in a white carriage pulled by 2 white horses, and was accompanied by a youth who appeared to be about 16 years old. Her manner of dress and her bearing were refined and elegant. She asked a young bhikkhu to show her the way to the Buddha's hut, but when they arrived there, the Buddha had not yet returned from his walking meditation. The bhikkhu invited the woman and the boy to sit on bamboo chairs in front of the hut. Shortly afterwards the Buddha returned, accompanied by Kaladahi, Sariputta, and Nagasamala. The woman and youth stood and bowed respectfully. The Buddha invited them to sit again as he sat down on a third bamboo chair. He understood that this woman was Ambapali, and that the youth was King Bimbisara's son, Jivaka. Kaladahi had never seen a woman more beautiful in all his life. He had only taken vows as a bhikkhu a month earlier, and he was confused as to whether or not it was proper for a bhikkhu to look at a beautiful woman. Unsure of what to do, he lowered his eyes to the ground. Nagasamala reacted in the same way. Only the Buddha and Sariputta looked directly into the woman's eyes. Sariputta looked at Ambapali and then at the Buddha. He saw how natural and relaxed the Buddha's gaze was. His face was as serene as a beautiful full moon. The Buddha's eyes were kind and clear. Sariputta felt as though the Buddha's contentment, ease, and joy penetrated Sariputta's own heart in that instant. Ambapali looked directly into the Buddha's eyes as well. No one had ever looked at her in the way the Buddha was looking at her now. As long as she could remember, men had gazed at her with either embarrassment or desire in their eyes. But the Buddha looked at her as he might look at a cloud, a river, or a flower. She had the impression that he could see deeply into her heart's thoughts. She joined her palms and introduced herself and her son. "I am Ambapali, and this is my son, Jivaka, who is studying to become a doctor. We have heard much about you, and we have both looked forward to this moment." The Buddha asked Jivaka about his studies and daily life. Jivaka answered politely. The Buddha could see that he was a kind-hearted and intelligent boy. Though he shared the same father as Prince Ajatasattu, it was evident he possessed a character of greater depth than the young prince. Jivaka's heart filled with respect and affection for the Buddha. He told himself that when he finished his medical studies, he would settle near the Buddha at Bamboo Forest. Before she met him, Ambapali had assumed that the Buddha would be like so many other famous teachers she had met. But she had never before met anyone like the Buddha. His gaze was unspeakably tender and kind. She felt as though he could understand all the sufferings locked inside her heart. Much of her pain was soothed just by the way he looked at her. Tears glistened on her eyelashes as she said, "Teacher, my life has been filled with suffering. Though I have never lacked for money or possessions, I have not felt anything to aspire to until now. Today is the happiest day of my life." Ambapali was an accomplished singer and dancer, but she would not perform for just anyone. If someone's manner or behavior displeased her, she refused to perform, no matter how much gold they might offer. When she was 16 years old, she became involved in a love affair that ended in heartbreak. Soon afterwards, she met the young prince Bimbisara, and they fell in love. She gave birth to their son Jivaka, but no one in the palace wanted to accept Ambapali and her son. Some members of the palace household even spread rumors that Jivaka was no more than an abandoned orphan that the prince had rescued from a barrel by the side of the road. Ambapali was hurt by these accusations. She endured humiliation caused by the jealousy and hatred of others in the palace. Soon she saw that her freedom was the only thing worth guarding. She refused to live in the palace and vowed that she would never relinquish her personal freedom to anyone. The Buddha spoke gently to her. Beauty arises and passes away like all other phenomena. Fame and fortune are no different. Only the peace, joy, and freedom that are the fruits of meditation bring true happiness. Ambapali, cherish and take good care of all the moments left you in this life. Do not lose yourself in forgetfulness or idle amusements. This is of utmost importance. The Buddha told Ambapali how she could arrange her daily life in a new way, breathing, sitting, and working in a spirit of mindfulness, and observing and practicing the 5 precepts. She was overjoyed to receive these precious teachings. Before departing, she said, "Just outside the city of Vasali, I own a mango grove that is both cool and peaceful. I hope that you and your bhikkhus might consider coming there for a visit. That would be a great honor to me and to my son. Please, Lord Buddha, consider my invitation." The Buddha smiled his acceptance. After Ambapali departed, Kaladahi asked permission to sit down beside the Buddha. Nagasamala invited Sariputta to sit on the other chair while he remained standing. A number of other bhikkhus passing by the hut paused and joined the gathering. Sariputta looked at Kaladahi and smiled. He looked at Nagasamala and smiled too. Then he asked the Buddha, "Master, how should a monk regard a woman's beauty? Is beauty, especially that of a woman, an obstacle to spiritual practice?" The Buddha smiled. He knew that Sariputta was not asking the question for himself, but on behalf of the other bhikkhus. He answered, "Bhikkhus, the true nature of all dharmas transcends beauty and ugliness. Beauty and ugliness are only concepts created by our minds. They are inseparably entwined with the struggle of the structure. They are inseparably entwined with the structure of the 5 aggregates. To the eyes of an artist, anything can appear beautiful, and anything can be rendered as ugly. A river, a cloud, a leaf, a flower, a ray of sunshine, or a golden afternoon all possess beauty. The golden bamboo growing nearby is beautiful, but perhaps no beauty has more capacity to distract a man's concentration than a woman's beauty. If one is obsessed with a woman's beauty, he can lose his way. Bhikkhus, when you have seen deeply and have attained the way, the beautiful may still appear beautiful, and the ugly may still appear ugly. But because you have attained liberation, you are not bound by either. When a liberated person looks at beauty, he can see that it is composed of many non-beautiful elements. Such a person understands the impermanent and empty nature of all things, including beauty and ugliness. Thus he is neither mesmerized by beauty nor repulsed by ugliness. The only kind of beauty that does not fade and that does not cause suffering is a compassionate and liberated heart. Compassion is the ability to love unconditionally, demanding nothing in return. A liberated heart is unbound by conditions. A compassionate and liberated heart is true beauty. The peace and joy of that beauty is true peace and joy. Bhikkhus, practice diligently and you will realize true beauty. Kaladayi and the other bhikkhus found the Buddha's words most helpful. The rainy retreat came to a close. The Buddha summoned Kaladayi and Channa and suggested they leave for Kapilavatthu first, in order to announce the Buddha's imminent arrival. Kaladayi and Channa made preparations for their trip without delay. Kaladayi, now a bhikkhu of calm and serene bearing, knew that everyone in the capital would be surprised when they saw him. He looked forward to the happy task of announcing the Buddha's return, but he regretted leaving Bamboo Forest after so brief a stay. And that, dear friends, is the close of our reading for today.